delighted to be joined by my colleague, Paul Coulombe. How you doing, Paul?
Very well. As well as can be, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, you've led mental health workshops with InsideOut, and we know these are really tricky times, to say the very least. How long should we wash our hands for? How do we actually wash our hands properly? How many times a day? How often should I wash my clothes? When I come in the front door, should I strip right down and not bring anything into the home? How do you put on gloves? How do you take off gloves? These are things that we didn't think about a week or two ago.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear out there. I mean, there just is. It's palpable. If you back the truck up a bit, even on an average week, most people are just challenged by life, whether it's work, life, family, finances, holding together relationships. Now you add on a pandemic with the stock market falling down and just everything from like food, you're worried about your loved ones and caring for the people you love, and locusts all over. It's like, what's happening? And I think at times like these, we have to go back and navigate through it as best we can. And there are some ways to actually do that, to stay grounded despite what's going on. And I think that's a key word there, is despite, because we don't have a lot of control over it, but there's some things that we can do internally to manage these.
Yeah, and I think we want to touch on sort of taking a little bit of a dive into some of the tools that people can consider. But this is definitely a time where you hit it on the head, I think, is that, we're always toying with this idea of kind of vacillating a little bit on the idea of control, and if that's kind of an ever elusive entity, if it's something that we should ultimately seek. But I think that it's something we feel a need to focus on, is to feel like we have a sense of control. And in this kind of environment, the reality is we don't, because this virus is sneaking up and biting people that are only blocks away, or maybe across the street, or in our house. So it's such a scary time for people. And maybe what we can do is kind of start with a breath and really coming together. And the fact that we're doing this right now is further reinforcing the idea that we can still socially connect and bring awareness to what's happening, and try to, bring the light and hopefully rise above.
Yeah, definitely. It's important. I mean, there's some, you mentioned, I think a little bit earlier about the mindfulness. There's some things that we can do to stay grounded, because we don't have a lot of control on these things. So I guess we have to kind of ask ourselves, well, what can we do? And a couple little things that, and we can go through this a little later, are just even things that might sound no-brainer, like sitting and breathing. It's like, well, I already know how to sit. I already breathe. Well, yes and no. That's been my experience. And little ways of looking at things, and what to do when our mind begins to stray and go off into those fearful places. Or this can be used even in practical times, whether you're sitting down to write an exam and your mind is straying, and just kind of bringing that back. There's ways to actually ground yourself. Yeah.
And also, like, how do we remain positive in the face of the storm at this time? Mm-hmm. And when it starts from within, and the kind of inside out view of things, as you're saying, and trying to get grounded and taking the breath and keeping a simple focus, which is not easy for any of us, but it's achievable. It's certainly achievable through practice, certainly.
Absolutely. I think there's a part in us as human beings, and it's the being part. It's the being part in human beings. That's ultimately what we need. It's so elusive because in a moment it can go away with being triggered by fear or whatever. But when we can actually settle with that, we find that it actually is, that is our safe place. And there's a sense of fullness in there. And it may not eradicate fear, like, extinguish it or zap it like a laser, but you can manage it. And that's one of the things it's one of the principles, I think, of the stress response, certainly in the mindfulness sphere, is you don't necessarily zap fear or get rid of it, but you can introduce relaxation. And let me say that again. You don't sort of eradicate the fear and set that goal, like, I got to stop being fearful. That may not happen, but you don't have to. You can introduce relaxation, and they're two very different things. They sound the same to the mind for a second. It's like, well, it sounds like the same thing. And the way I like to think about it is just like that lemonade example. If you had a cup of a big glass, and it was that full of bitter lemon juice, fully acidic, acetic acid, ascorbic acid, you'd never chug it. It might even be, it's acidic and it would do damage to your stomach lining. You even say, well, I want to drink, I better get rid of it. Not necessarily. You add the ice and water and a few sprigs of mint and some sugar, and you mix it around. It's about the best drink you can have on a hot day. You haven't gotten rid of anything, but you've opened and you've, for lack of a better word, flooded or accepted it with some of those resources within inside you. And after a while, the stress does minimize by itself, but not because we told it to go away. When we practice these things, it does dissolve, but on its own. That's my experience.
Yeah, and looking for kind of the steadying point of reference and finding calm in this external, undeniable environment that we're in is kind of what we've been thrown into. And certainly things like mindfulness have been a recent movement where more and more people are taking it on. And I think it occurs to me that, adjusting is a buzzword right now because everything is changing so quickly. Every country is trying to flatten the curve, and things, in some ways feel like they're going to continue to get kind of worse before they get, under control. So, what we do have control over is trying to practice and introduce coping mechanisms, and also try to stay positive. So how do you stay positive in an environment like the one that we're trying to live in right now, as we're in, self-isolation and physical distancing, quarantine? It's a real predicament, but I think what we're here to talk about is ways that people can look for inspiration and discover some new tools through simple breath and just trying to be and let go.
Yeah, I agree. I really believe that you find that in yourself. I mean, everyone finds that within themselves. You can share knowledge, but you can't impart relaxation on somebody else. You have to learn it. You have to learn and experience how to do that. But I think part of the answer, at least for me, and what I see out there, is the difference between I am my stress, I am my anxiety, and I have fear. And again, the human mind, just like that last one, was the same thing. No, they're very, very different. There's a big gulf between those two statements. I am my fear. That's the kind where your mind just goes in circles over and over and over, and you worry about, in this case, a pandemic. It could be anything. It could be your mother-in-law coming through the front door. It could be your father-in-law. It could be any little trigger you have. Something says, it activates that sort of I am my fear. But when you practice these techniques, these centering techniques, something begins to separate. You go, okay, well, I'm not a robot here, immune to anything, but it starts to go into, yeah, I have fear. And that's a very, very different thing. It's like in have you seen the movie with, what was it, Tom Hanks and Mr. Rogers? Mr. Rogers said something very, very important. He says, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. In other words, if it's mentionable, you can almost, I'm going to wheel my chair out, you can put some distance and look at it and go, oh, okay, it's that. It's not you. That's the big difference.
Yes.
And the human mind gets completely entangled in a second, in a nanosecond. It's, oh my God, I'm going to be annihilated. I have fear. But if you can actually work at separating that, then you see both sides. You go, there's my beingness that sees it, the observer, the watcher, and there is the fear, for sure. You're not denying anything. And it's a lot more, I think it's a lot more whole. There's the wholeness of the human and being together, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot right there for sure. And I think, my follow-up to that, I mean, you said a lot there that's pretty rich and thought-provoking, where you're kind of separating yourself from your thoughts and trying to be, as you said earlier, I believe, not just the human and the being part. I know that's something in the totality of being, and that's part of a platform that we talk about and you talk about a lot. It's really trying to kind of, feel your feelings and not personalize things to such a great, intensive, anxious, chronic state. And to try to, run some interference on what is this perpetual wheel of motion that is mobilizing the fear, the worry, the concern, the things that we can't control. Mm-hmm. So now we want to be in a position where with some of these tools, we can feel a sense of calm. And what I want to add too is like a real sense of humility, stripping away ego, and human. Just, in this case, the human side of the human being, because I know that's a phrase that you go back to, which is really critical. But if we can accept that we're vulnerable, we're imperfect, and, sometimes out of the chaos comes a lesson and something magnificent. So that's one way where we can have a takeaway for something really, really brilliant and positive to hopefully look forward to.
Yeah, well, and that's why it's yeah, absolutely. I keep saying the human and the being, and it is true. I do say that often because I think that people are leaving money on the table out there. I think that they're discounting the being part of themselves, and without getting too, esoteric and philosophical and waxing on that way, which on a practical level, when people say, oh, well, I'm only human, that's just not true. You have the being part of you that already is safe, it already is full, it's sitting right there. When you experience things, then you can use the human side and choose what to do. The problem is, and in so many things, we just get stuck on that human side. And it's like Einstein said, a problem cannot be solved from the same level, the consciousness that created it. You're not going to solve these kinds of problems with the mind, like with logic and conceptualizing it out. It's not going to happen. So that's where, we need to kind of in fact, that's our little trap that keeps us walled off. It walls us off from this other part of ourselves. When that slows, when you can actually slow the mind, the other part grows. The being part, and then you begin to kind of root yourself in that being and go, oh, okay. So it's almost like, it's kind of a good problem to have in some ways. Our minds are massive. It's not like we're too stupid to do it. We're too smart to do it half the time, because our minds are so powerful and we don't even know how powerful they are. We just need to learn those little ways of, and you don't want to throw away the mind. The mind's a wonderful tool. I mean, we invent vaccines and we go to the moon and solve problems and do a zillion things. We don't want to give that up. We just want to give up the identification that there's something at stake. I'm going to be annihilated versus, I have some money issues right now. One is a true statement on one level, and the other is just a false kind of thing that we fly in the flap over.
Yeah, and I
So
think, sorry.
But it's not about becoming this spiritual robot. That's just, it's about just honoring both sides. We really are full and we have problems at the same time on this level. And there's a wholeness in that. Whereas one, it's not whole at all. It's like, there's just, your 100% of your awareness is wrapped up in that. Sorry.
Yeah. And I think to add on to that are the way that we're conditioned in our mind and paradigms that we have in terms of the stories we tell ourselves of narration, where we're self-doubting, self-loathing, and really disempower ourselves or disable in terms of our inspiration. I think that what we're talking about is that there are certain things that we do have control over in terms of creating an external routine and a schedule and life skills and habits. But when it comes to figuring out some of the deeper stuff that sort of takes us being ready to dive into these things on a total level of humanness and being able to let go is one of the most profound challenges we can have, to just kind of be. And so here we are with this global pandemic. And so I guess my message would be, take a breath, try to melt away in time with each breath some of those worries and fear, and come back to the idea of, belief that we're going to get through this, that we can achieve a state of flow once again where things kind of level out and hopefully, normalize, where we can kind of step outside and get close to someone in a friendly, welcoming kind of way again.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And in that way, like anything else, you can harness it. If you can harness a problem on the micro level in your individual life, and you can harness a problem at work and harness a problem to actually awaken you spiritually, then you can harness a pandemic. May this too serve to awaken me. Now, you might say, well, to awaken to what? To more thinking? No, it's not about the mind. It's about that other place I'm talking about. That's what we awaken to. And we, as human beings, we have a tough time getting there. But yeah, you can absolutely do that. And I'd like to go back to just and touch on something you said a minute ago. I forget exactly how you put it, but in my mind arose when I took physics in high school, grade 13 at the time, showing my age, and then again in university for a year, at least a couple of courses, anyways. So the teacher said, all those classical Newtonian physics laws that we memorized and learned about how a rocket flies and all that, on the quantum, they don't apply anymore. They're completely useless. And so it's kind of like, we have this brain and it triangulates things and it references, and it's fantastic at doing so. We build computers and we all want that. But when, I think, I forget exactly what you said, but when it starts to go over to the meaning of things and the identity of ourselves, it's relatively, it's not very effective. So we just need to know that. And then I think that actually helps us give over control, because if you can't use it, well, what can you do? You can just accept that. And you don't need to control it, really.
Yeah, and that's a bit of an awakening, to use your term from just at the beginning of your last comment there, because ultimately how much control do we have? So it's a real sort of coming of age and, you know, evolution from within, if you will, from the inside out. Once again, in our journey to coming to be at peace with ourselves at moments, and hopefully making those moments into hours, weeks, and you know, a lifetime.
Yeah. I think it's our life's work. You know, we spend the first half of our life, you know, taking cues from society, and like you said earlier, like thinking we're a piece of crap or beating ourselves up, or maybe you didn't use those words, or we get all these ideas in the first half of our life, and then you have to spend the second half letting them all go. It's all about letting go, really, in one form or of another. But the human mind will say, you know what I mean when I say the human mind, the ego, that fearful place. Let go. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that because it's seen as weak or a diminishment of itself. Oh, that's the problem, as we take our cues from that. But I would say go ahead and try it and see if a little bit of expansion occurs. Just try it with little things in your life. Just let the ego go a little bit here, over there, or let the fear go, and just try that. And you may see an actual expansion instead of a diminishment. But nobody teaches us that, right? It's like you have to figure it out.
Yeah, well said. You know, we're you know, being a little bit thought provoking, and a light will go on for anyone watching. You know, this discussion on mental well-being, mindfulness, and coping tools during this point in history, really, where, you know, when you look at generations, you know, our parents and grandparents, they haven't seen anything like this. So, you know, we've got to try to come together internally, and as a community as well, to support each other and look for ways to really flip this 180, and see it as some kind of opportunity, because guess what? We don't have a choice.
Well said. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that Buddhist phrase. Was it relax? Nothing's in your control. It's like it shows a little baby. It's so true. You might as well. Well, I'm saying nothing's. We do have control over certain things, but absolutely. Yeah. And I think that there is opportunity. Many of us now have made phone calls that we never would have made. I've called my mom over and over. I'm lucky if I did it twice a month before. Old friends. I'm terrible at keeping in touch. You know, I'm not very good at social media, and I really need to. Oh my goodness, have I ever reached out? And I'm not the only one. I've been hearing that. We had a Zoom party the other night, like just you know 4 or 5 different families on, and you know, little things like that. But what I also see is people just waking up to little things in the fullness of the moment. And I think that's the whole thing, is if you can use it to let go, you don't let go into a lifeless void. You let go into your fullness. That's the trick of the mind. It thinks, oh, let go into uncertainty or nothing there. You know, and even practicing mindfulness or meditation, you know, that silence you get. It's not a dead silence. It's alive. There's a fullness there. There is a depth there. That's what we really want. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both. That's the beauty about being a human being, is you know, like I think Jesus said, or I think it was Jesus, like, you know, be in the world but not of it. So you're fully in the world. You're fully working. You're gardening. You're doing things, but you're just not. You know, you're honoring that other realm in you that's a little higher. That's that's full. That's safe. That's the spirit, maybe, is a word for it. Present self, awakeness. Call it whatever you want. It doesn't change it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, hopefully we've offered a little bit up for people in the way of I would hope some inspiration or solace. Certainly, it's a time of compassion, support, and sharing, and just, our conversation here. And this is kind of what, I've tried to put out for a couple of decades now, hopefully communicating better than I have in the past with more experience. But, it's just for all of us, when you strip it away, we're humans, we have our vulnerabilities. And I think in this moment, we can be brave, we can take a breath and step into another day that could possess a little bit of magic to it too, that we can discover internally, as well as hopefully being able to, of course, open our doors someday really soon. So
Yes.
we want to leave it there, but if you want to add anything just briefly onto that.
I just want to tip my hat to you, and Barry, you're well known in our community, and you've always been this. At least I see you as a connector. I mean, I never would have done a webinar like this, or I know your spring into action has always been pulling together different people, and now you're doing it online. This right here is one of the benefits of the pandemic, because I think that there's a lot of this going on. And on some level, it's something good is happening as well. So it doesn't discount the fear, and I'm not at all minimizing what we already know is happening out there. And it's terrible trauma.
Yeah, well, I thank you for the kind words. This is a weighty moment, and I think it's where we can maybe make a small impact. So for anyone that stayed through the whole thing, that's maybe a small miracle in itself. So thanks again for watching, and watch for more Inside Out lifestyle, mental health, fitness, and wellness content you can look forward to, and a lot featuring Paul, who while he says nice things about me, it's a real honor. And the metaphors are always really rich and thoughtful. So we'll talk again, Paul, and we're going to do it in this moment, during this time, and using technology so we can kind of be socially connected that way and keep it going.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Barry. Thank you, everyone.
Be well and stay safe.